CEO of OCD UK as well, who's here to answer any questions. So can we have a round of applause for our guests as they come into the auditorium? We've got Ashley Forward and we've got Ian Paulson-Davis as well. Right, gents, over to you. But I mean, I was just going to say, if we can cover a little bit about how the film got to Square Chapel, I'd be quite interested, maybe, because there'll be a lot of people here who won't know the journey of how it sort of got to be shown here. So if we can maybe touch on that.
Yeah. When it first got screened, I was inundated with responses from all around the world because this film got picked up by Sundance in America and it got shown on their channel for a month. And so it did very well in America, but still people missed it, and in this country particularly. So I was forever asked why it wasn't ever shown again, because as we all know, ITV particularly love their repeats, and I've been quite saddened over the years. I've done other stuff as an actor, some films that I'm not particularly proud of that I am forever seeing on television. And so it saddens me to think that something that deals with this important issue never saw the light of day again. So that's always been a gripe with me with ITV ever since. And apart from anything else, I wanted people to appreciate the performances. But it was the message that was the most important factor to my continuing knocking on the door to no avail. And then I mentioned this to you, Sophia. There you are. How it sort of was gathering dust in some ITV wardrobe cupboard somewhere, and you brilliantly said, "Well, let's try and get it on here." And I said, "No chance. You won't have it. You won't have any." What happened?
We asked for it, and they said yes.
But I've been asking it for 10 years, 14 years. Who did you ask?
ITV and the archive people. I've got all contact details.
Right. So I think departments change, come and go. So I just think I was stuck with a very stubborn department for many, many years. But what are you saying?
Pull your microphone forward.
You can hear me, can't you?
I know, but it's nice to have them.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so that's great. So that's why it's here tonight. The first airing, and the first time I've seen it since 2004 as well. So that was, sorry, Ashley, I'll bring you in a minute. But I am, seeing it tonight made me even more determined to get it back on television. I think it should have at least another airing, just so people, because you'd be amazed. No, I'm going to shut up. You'd be amazed.
Yeah, right.
How many people even today will watch something like this and will say, "Oh my God, I didn't know what it was." I didn't. So anyway,
I'm not going to say it's just because you're sat there, but I have to watch all the OCD programs and films because of my job for the charity. But I still think that's one of the more educated, amongst all the laughter and the jokes and the crying that goes on in the film. It's still one of the more educational, which gets down to the nub of it, what people need, which is a combination of CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, and medication. And most other programs gloss over that. Your previous program that you was in, Coronation Street, they made an ash of it recently, but we won't go into that. But
can I ask you though? Ask you? I didn't see the storyline. Were you not happy with it? Because I mean, that's not loaded. I genuinely want to know.
No, I'm happy to say. I mean, it started out fantastic. They were doing a really good portrayal of somebody suffering with OCD, the check-in, and it was a really good build-up to it. But then they just decided the storyline was over, and they just went through it very quickly. Lots of jokes. But forget that. Let's go back to Dirty Filthy Love. You just said there that you've not watched it for a lot of years. What are your reflections now? Seen it back after, 12 years?
Okay, 14, I think.
14,
yeah. I was worried about tonight because I honestly thought, and you may disagree, but I honestly thought it would have dated, and I was concerned about that because I thought like every film, television, play, anything, it can have a sell-by date. So I was hugely relieved that I didn't think it didn't feel like it had a sell-by date, and I did feel that the message and the script and certainly the performances held up to the age. I think Michael Sheen is quite stunning in it, and let's forget about OCD for a minute. His performance is, I think, quite staggering, and I had to fight for someone of his caliber. Initially, I wanted it to be me, and interestingly enough, a little backstage, behind the scenes anecdote. Jeff Pope, who co-wrote it with me, on the day they were talking casting. On the day they were talking about casting, he said, look, I think it's best, it'd be embarrassing, a bit awkward if you were in the room for the meeting, because I'd been to all the other meetings with Andy Harries and all the other execs and producers. And he said, I think if we're going to talk casting, I think it's best if you stay away from this meeting. So I said, fine. So I stayed in the office while they went into the meeting room. And he came back later, and I was waiting like a little boy. And he said, it's not you. I went, okay, what happened? He said, well, I mentioned your name, but right at the top of the meeting, and they all were so enthusiastic. All of them, Christine Langan, all the top bots, they were all saying, we love you. God, what a great idea. Anyway, moving on. So I lasted about 10 seconds of the conversation because I didn't have the clout or the reputation or the name of the CV, whatever, the politics of casting lead people in TV drama. Pushed for him.
So taking it back to the very beginning, so prior to 2004, where did Dirty Filthy Love come from, the script?
Okay.
The idea.
I'd started writing it on my own. I'd watched As Good As It Gets with Jack Nicholson, and I was disappointed because I remember I was glad it had been made, and I'm glad it had the Hollywood banner, and it was dealing with mental illness, and it was a comedy, and I thought that's great. I salute you for doing that. But they got it completely wrong, because this illness is known as the secretive disorder. We disguise it incredibly well. I mean, I know I buffoonerized what we did in the doorway then, but that was for dramatic effect. But we are experts at disguising it. We really are. And I'm sure I'm hoping there's some sufferers out there, but we are experts at disguising it. For instance, that scene, and I'm digressing, but that scene when I'm sitting down, he explains it, doesn't he, a little bit later to his flatmate. But in the beginning, when he's having the scene with his bosses, his employers, he does all that sitting down. That is exactly what I've honed it to a fine art. And even now, I'm better now, by the way. So I was able to sit down. A bit worried that normally in an interval or something, I would normally have to sit down on a chair. But I'm much better at the moment, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in the early days, whenever I sat down, I did exactly that. I had this whole drama. It was like this sort of fake performance to get over the fact that what I was doing was examining the chair, and that's what I showed in the film. So I couldn't just sit down like that because of the reasons was discussed, coccyx, foundations, chipping teeth. So what I'd have to do is, and I'm going to mimic what I did in the film, was I'd go to the chair and I'd go, do you want me to sit here? Is this all right, Bob? What? Oh, no, okay. Hang on, where are my keys? I'm all right. So, yeah, no. So, I'd be throwing all this smoke screen of excuses, but what I'm actually doing is measuring the back of my leg against the chair so I know exactly the distance. Because my brain is telling me, my OCD is saying, you have to be finite, you have to be exactly precise about the distance, because it's like one of those. Remember those airplanes that used to land, and they'd have to, or a helicopter, in fact, that would land. You'd have to be if you did it one way, you'd break. So you'd smash. So I'd have to do it so carefully and so many times. Now, of course, you can't in a restaurant, in a public place, do that because it looks ridiculous. So I would feign all this mimicry of, here I come. No, I'm joking. That was an excuse to sit down. So I'd be doing this all the time until the back of my leg. Back of my leg would feel a bit, and then I'd be able to go down, and then, am I all right? Yeah, I'm fine. No, not quite. Hang on. Put that there. Again, an excuse. And then eventually I'd be able to sit down. Oh, it's knackering. Anyway, but that's what I was saying. Coming back, what was I saying about the film?
Where it started from, where the idea came from.
Where the hell did the chair come from then?
I know, you went off in a tangent.
I know, but what was it? What was the lead? Good as it gets. Thank you. So that's a disguise. That is an absolute disguise because I don't want people to know I'm being weird. Whereas As Good As It Gets, you'd have Jack Nicholson, for instance. He couldn't walk over. Has anyone seen the film? He couldn't walk over the cracks. Now, I couldn't. I mean, for me, going from my flat to the tube would take about half an hour, and it was only 40 yards down the road, because everything was just, life-threatening. But he, in the film, if you remember, he'd be skipping over the cracks. Well, you wouldn't do that. If you're an OCD sufferer, you just wouldn't do that. It's clowning. So I got very angry about that. Then there was another film called Matchstick Men. Again, I just didn't think that they explored the illness well enough. And that's when I thought, well, look, I might as well give it a go myself. So I sat down and started writing it. And originally in my first draft, it was going to be a lawyer. And then Jeff came on board and said, I'd like to write something with you. We were going to do something else. And I said, well, no, put that on hold. Let me pitch to you my idea about a man with OCD. And he ran with it. So it was in its initial stages before I teamed up with Jeff. And again, we went from lawyer to actor, and then we decided an architect might be the best portrayal.
So in the programme, a lot of the OCD scenes are quite comical. How do you think that would be portrayed today? With social media, which when it went out in 2004, there was no social media. How do you think it would be received by the public online today?
You think in what respect would they be offended by it?
Yeah, that's the question. People are immediately offended these days.
It's a fine line, isn't there? I mean, I've said this many, many times, I didn't want it to be worthy. I didn't want it to be patronising. I didn't want it to be shoved away on BBC Two at 10 o'clock with a stamp of authenticity or, we have approval. I didn't want that because the wrong people were, not the wrong people, but
people
I wanted
to see it.
I wanted to I wanted it to be a bigger audience, and I didn't think we'd get the audience. So that's why we sexed up the title. We called it Dirty Filthy Love to think why that might attract a few viewers. Anything to put it on primetime television Sunday night 8 o'clock, and it worked. And people who I would imagine a lot of people wouldn't have watched it if they'd known it was a serious tragedy about a person suffering mental health. So, and I also from the outset I was insistent that it should be funny. Funny for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. So I like to think that. I mean, I found it hilarious. We were laughing throughout because it's funny, and I think that's important. And it's also important that I had the characters laughing with each other, because I remember we'll talk a bit at length a little bit later about the self-help group. But some of my funniest evenings were spent sitting around a table with these other sufferers. We spent most of the evening laughing. And that was so therapeutic because it made us feel normal in a way. And I don't think it detracts from the seriousness, the issue, the fact that it can be taken out of context and people can be teased, particularly in the playground. I know there's a huge responsibility there, Ashley, but nevertheless, it was important to me for people to realise it's okay to laugh with us because we know it's ridiculous. Does that make sense to you? What do you think, actually?
Well, absolutely. I think that as a sufferer myself, just before I go on that, for those that are willing to acknowledge that, how many of you in the audience do actually suffer with OCD? Not that it's sort of a little bit OCD rubbish that we hear about all the time, but proper OCD. Okay, there's a few people here today, so a few people will know from your own experiences. But I think I've told you this before, but the programme went out at 8 o'clock, finished at around 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night. We actually logged into our helplines that night, and we were still quite a small.
This is before we knew each other, by the way.
And I think I've told you before, but we had something like 2,000 calls were presented to the helpline in that 2-hour period between 10 p.m. and midnight. And over the subsequent few days, I was taking as many as we could, and majority of people calling were actually saying it was such a relief to know that the things I'm struggling with were OCD.
Wow.
So yeah, absolutely. So but by doing it the way you did it, I think we did reach people that we might not have reached at that point. And as I said before as well, that I think it just, amongst all the laughter and the sadness, there is some educational side in there. I mean, even now, it shouldn't be like this, but you go into a GP surgery and you can even tell your GP you've got OCD, but they'll just say, well, "There's the medication," and they'll just throw medication at you. So 14 years on, that bit still rings true.
My agent, typical actor. My doctor didn't know what it was when I went in and gave that speech, and I had actually narrowed it down to three things. I did think it was one of those three, and he had to look it up. He didn't and didn't have an answer. He actually didn't have an answer, and this is in the mid-90s. And it was only my therapist who I was seeing for depression at the time. And I actually said, I went to my therapist one day and I said, I wonder, can we just put the where am I, who am I, what am I on hold for one session and talk about this other thing? And this other thing I didn't think had anything to do with the depression. I said, something else is going on in my life. I've had it for as long as I can remember. And I said, I think I'm going crazy, blah, blah, blah. And she said, what are the symptoms? And she said, I don't have a clue what it is, but I'll make some inquiries. And then I went up to Wales where I lived at the time, and I was really rock bottom. I was very, very low. My OCD was all consuming. I couldn't function. I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. By the way, in the opening, when he's lying in the bed, that did happen to me. I couldn't. As soon as I woke up in the morning, I couldn't lift my head off the pillow because I'd fear I'd break my neck. So it'd take me about 20 minutes to sort of like loosen up my neck and prepare for. It was like a gymnast. It was ridiculous. Just standing on my feet, I felt like I had to be put 2 hours of training in. So that would take forever, and then sitting back, I'd have to sit up slowly in case I felt I broke my back, and sitting down with my toes on the feet on the ground, and so that would be exhausting. And I was literally bedridden. And then I had a phone call from Stevie, my therapist in London. She goes, I've had a chat with a colleague. She thinks she knows what it is. As soon as you get back to London, contact me. Blah 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 blah. I went in and she said, I think it's called OCD. And I'd never heard of it before. She put me in touch with a very expensive therapist on Harley Street. Cost me £125. Couldn't believe it.
Bargain.
How much? Yeah, now. I couldn't believe it. But within 2 minutes of me telling him these symptoms, he said quite calmly, whilst pushing a box of tissues over to me, because he knew I'd be upset, which I was, and he said, "It's all right. You're not alone." Because at the time, when you don't know what it is, you think you're the only person on the planet, So any messages from outer space, from out there, is there anyone out there that was happening in my life? The only clue I had was, as a kid, I used to go through my mum's woman's own, and I for no other reason than I was interested in women's problems. And I can't believe I just said that. But I'd always go to the problem page, and one day there was a lady, a woman had written in and said, dear whoever the Margie Croops of her day was, this is a long time ago, I can't stop washing my hands. And it was like a signal from outer space. As this 8-year-old or 9-year-old, I was going, oh my God, I'm not just this person on a desert island. There is someone out there. And that was the only clue I had. But it took so many years later, sitting in this very expensive room, to find out that I had a condition. That it wasn't one of those three, but it was called OCD. And I did. I wept like a baby, but partly through relief that I didn't have the aneurysm or, whatever else. Partly that I wasn't going crazy. And also quite angry that no one else had told me, and I'd had it since I was fucking 7, and here I was as a 35-year-old man, and no one had told me what I had. So that's when I thought, God, there's a great story here, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward to Jeff, and the rest is Halifax history.
So the Tourette's, is that part of you? Is that part of your condition, or is that for comedy effect in the film?
How dare you? No, it wasn't actually. Initially, we were only concentrating on the OCD aspect of the character, and I didn't know at the time, in my ignorance, I didn't know, and I feel quite embarrassed to say this, that there was a connection between OCD and Tourette's. I knew everything about OCD, sort of, but nothing about Tourette's. And one morning, I was on the tube going to work with Jeff on the South Bank, where his office was, and it was a very busy commuter train. And a guy opposite me started barking like a dog. And like in the film, everyone in the carriage, including me, started looking at him thinking, what is this guy doing? And the remarkable thing is, he was in I think he was Spanish or Italian, foreign guy, and he was sitting with a friend, and they were having this ordinary morning conversation, and every now and again he'd bark. But what was fascinating, it wasn't just him, but his friend, they didn't bat an eyelid. He'd be going, woo! And then he'd be carrying on, woo! Woo! Talking, and I was just in shock that he was doing and I was meant to stay on the tube for another few stops for Waterloo, but I got off and I followed him. And I followed him up the escalators with his mate. And all the way up the escalators, they carried on chatting, not batting an eyelid, but every few seconds, he let out this almighty bark. And it was astonishing. The whole two lines of escalator, whatever, were staring at him, and he wasn't aware. Didn't seem bothered about it. Anyway, I went to work, and I told Jeff about this, and we looked it up. And then we found out about this whole other bag of mental health tricks. So I said, we've got to put this in because I will never forget the look on those people and my response. And then we looked into vocal tics, physical tics, Tourette's. At the time I had physical tics, we had that. Michael had that because I had them, and you've probably seen them. I do that a lot, and I do that, and I twitch. But physical tics and vocal tics are very different. You have to have both, I think, to be called Tourette's. Did you know that? It's an umbrella word. To have Tourette's, you have to have vocal and physical. If you just have one or the other, it's physical or vocal. And what swearing is, I mean, remember the guy from Scotland who had that documentary about him, and he became famous because of it and set up a charity. And Michael, on the back of Dirty Filthy Love, Michael is now a patron of this guy's charity. But he was the first person on television. Do you remember it? What was he called? John's Not Mad. That was it, wasn't it? And it's remarkable. Anyway, it's called coprolalia, and it's a part of the Tourette umbrella. And coprolalia is when you bark or speak out expletives or on PC things. So we thought, not for comedy effect, but we thought, come on, let's if we're going to make this, let's have. And then we found out there was a strong connection between the two. So, and again, the alopecia is another reason why we thought it would be quite necessary. We thought, we've got 90 minutes. Let's try and educate people with as many illnesses as possible, really.
And the air pollen is actually quite interesting because I've watched it several times now over the years. Sometimes with you, I think. Before we've been talking, actually, not with yourself. But even today, I just noticed she was very subtly just pulling her hair before, and I'd not noticed that before.
Yeah.
Which again is something that happens, unfortunately, for a lot of people.
I had a girlfriend who had who pulled hair. It's not alopecia. I'm so sorry.
Trichotillomania.
It's yeah. What's abbreviation for it? Trick. It's not alopecia at all. Forgive me. It's trick. And I had a girlfriend who tricked quite a lot. So that was another reason actually for plonking it in.
So go back to the film then. Is there anything that you would want to change today if you were able to redo it?
I'd like to have played the part. Apart from that, I'd like to have got more money. I'd also liked it to. I've said about the airing, a second airing and a third airing.
So what do you think about the farm scene where she's getting to put her hands on the?
That's fine because they do. There are groups around the well, I certainly know in the UK that go camping. And they do submerge themselves in mud and all that. Some of you might say, but what's the difference between that and that? It's very subtle, but it's a fundamental between doing, rubbing yourselves in muck. I've done that. Rolled myself in muck to making it out to be just insane.
I mean, it's when you suffer with OCD, sometimes you have to go to the extreme lengths to overcome it. So exposure therapy, as we call it, and. I mean, I do this at conferences all the time, just to show, because I used to suffer with contamination OCD. I still do to a bit. At one point, if I drop my phone on the floor, that would have to be thrown away, whichever side it landed. But these days, I can rub the sole of my shoe. I even get it off, take my shoe off, and lick the sole of my shoe, which even I do that to show that it would fit in that program as being completely wacky, kind of weird thing. But I do it so that I can stay better. I don't do it every single day. I just do it on occasions like this, just for to wind people up as much as anything. Yeah. But yeah. So I think that, and there's also another great scene in the support group scene where I'm just interested to get your take on this as a sufferer rather than co-writer, the main female character, she talks about having OCD was a curse, but the other female support group member talks about it being part of her. So what's your take on that?
What's your take on it?
That's not how it works. It's not supposed to
Well, you know, when we were advertising this tonight, I was asked to do a soundbite for Sophia, and I was on holiday, was I? I think I was on holiday, and I did a little soundbite, and I was trying to sell tonight, and I said about me and him, I said, we're like the two Ronnies of the mental health world. I can't believe I said that. But we are, though, aren't we?
Yeah, you're the funny one, but
Yeah,
but
okay, I'll take that.
yeah,
No, we are, though. It's him and her.
yeah. I mean, we were. I mean, I work with people with OCD all day, every day, and people have got different opinions on this. For me, I don't want to believe OCD is part of me. I will fight till the very day I die to get rid of it. And I'm 90% recovered. I've still got a bit of work to do. So it is part of me, but it's only a very small part of me at this time. But I'm determined if I'm going to let it remain part of me. So I very much take the fight. You know, we've got to fight this thing. That's the sort of take I have on it. But I know that not everybody feels comfortable with that opinion, and that's why I just wondered what. It was interesting. It was in the film. I just wondered what yours.
It's funny. I don't know where I stand. That's why I really don't know where I stand on this, actually, because sometimes I am defiant to the last, and I often use the quote that I wrote in there, which is, I will not. In fact, it will be on my gravestone. I refuse to go to my grave clutching my wet wipes, and I've said that forever, and I'm determined that's going to happen. So I do fight the fight every day, and I win some battles, but as we know, we've not yet won the war. But there's a moment which we wrote, and Michael did it beautifully. At the very end, when he has this epiphany, about when he says to his ex-wife, "I've always had it," and there's a certain calmness. Do you remember it when there's a certain at peace with himself? And I put that in for those people who do think it is part of them, and I don't know the best way to get rid of it. So sometimes I'll get up and I'll go, "Okay, OCD, you are my friend today. You are actually part of my makeup. Maybe I wouldn't be the actor I would be if I didn't have you, because I wouldn't be so forensic about the way people walk, sniff, talk, be. I wouldn't be the writer I am if I didn't have that antennae, that forensic antennae. David Beckham he wouldn't have been the best free kicker in the world if he hadn't have been obsessed about practicing those free kick takes. You know, there's so many examples that suggest that maybe OCD is part of the reason you are good at one thing or another.
But
the flip
could you
side,
be better without it?
Would you though? That's the piece that Michael Sheen marked as at the end is that this is me, like it or lump it, and I've got to like it or lump it. There's that, or there's the flip side is, fuck you. I do not want you to dictate who I am or how well I can be, because how dare you presume that you have made me the actor I am. I don't know. Sometimes at my age, I'm thinking, I'm still battling. Maybe I should, we should maybe, come, I don't know, meet in the middle.
Yeah, but as you know, the trouble with meeting OCD in the middle is it's a sneaky little bugger. It will always want it, give it an inch, it will always demand a mile. Yeah. So that's why I believe we have to go on the attack.
I'm just feeling a little bit charitable towards it tonight. But tomorrow morning, I'll be, gloves on, and I'll be back, battling it. But you just let your shoe. That's
I regret doing that. It tasted bloody horrible.
That's extraordinary. That's leaps and bounds.
Well, I mean, when we first met, there's no way I could have done that. So, yeah,
that's remarkable. So that's CBT.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've never taken medication for OCD, but that was a personal choice rather than anything else. It was GPs have tried to force me, a bit like they did in the film, but I just chose to go down the CBT route.
And it's working.
And do you mind if I ask about?
Don't look the other shoe, please. I can cope with it.
Yeah, you know. What about that? Is that?
No, I couldn't go anywhere near that.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that scene when he strips off his clothes, I didn't actually suck my balls in bleach, but I came as damn close to it. I went to the Royal Exchange in Manchester once, and I went into the cubicle to have a pee, and I was convinced there was whatever on. I won't go into it. On the seat, and I was on my way. Oh, it's a long story, which I'll cut to 2 minutes. I was on my way to a job in Newcastle, and my suitcase with my change of clothes was in my car, but because I'd spent so long locked in the cubicle, frozen with fear because I was convinced it was tramp's poo, because I knew this toilet at the Royal Exchange Theatre was often used by, and I said tramps, and I'm sorry, but I remember thinking, it's tramp's poo. Where I got that from is like heron poo, but I was convinced it was tramp's poo. Tramps. So, and I couldn't move, and because I couldn't move, I couldn't get to the car to get my suitcase before getting on the train, which took me to Newcastle for my day's filming. So I had to leave my suitcase in the car and go with the clothes I had on, which by now I was convinced was absolutely sodden with tramp's poo. Get on the train and sit rigid for however long, so 3 hours to Newcastle, spend the evening in my hotel, managed to get my clothes off, peel them off, and shower, and had to put them on again in the morning. There was nothing on them. There was nothing on them. It had got nowhere near, but it was in the same cubicle, literally, physically, a cubicle of air, and I was convinced...
Once that thought sticks...
I was convinced that air in the air, the poo that was on the seat, had got onto my clothes. But I had to put them back on the next morning, then go to work. It was the first day of filming. I had to take them off, put a costume on, but of course I was contaminated because I'd been in my clothes, because I was then convinced that my costume was contaminated. Spend the whole day filming, not being able to talk with any actors, and then go home that following night. And when I got back to Chester, I'd rung my girlfriend, forewarned her, and I told her and the kids to stay well away. I went in through the front door. There were bin bags there. I stripped off all my clothes, put them in bin bags, put them in the cellar, which they are where they are still today. That was 4 years ago. And I can't even go to the bin bags because it is glowing with contamination, and spend an hour in the shower scrubbing myself.
So I'm laughing excited because that's a very similar scenario that before I avoided using public toilets for 10 years, and there's a great scene in the film where he gets to the top of the stairs and he's jumping up and down because he's climbed the stairs, the most mundane thing in the world. And for me, that my Mount Everest was being able to use the public toilet where I worked in London at the time. But prior to being able to do that, I got caught short one day. I had to use the toilets at work. So all my clothes, my shirts, the suit, everything I was wearing, same thing. I got home, they had to be thrown into a bin liner. I couldn't keep them, they had to be thrown away. So I used to share a flat with the probation officer. She was never in before 10 o'clock at night. So there's me carefully tiptoeing through the hallway, being careful not to touch anything. So you remember, if anything gets touched, then that's contaminated as well. Get halfway down the hallway, almost make it to the bathroom, and then she walks straight out the hallway, sees me completely naked. And she just turned around, went back in, and we've never spoken about it to this day. I can laugh about it now, but that's where OC takes it. OC takes it to some ridiculous places.
And they're hilarious. You've got to laugh about them.
But
that's mad. That's
if
so
somebody was
funny.
to laugh at me, that would be different. Yeah. Exactly.
Knock them out.
So,
I mean, we go to years ago. I was in Camden looking for a present for someone. I went into this joke shop, and there was a for sale in this joke shop was an OCD doll shaped like Action Man, and complete with wet wipes and a few other sanitary things. I bought it, and I take it when have I brought it to one of the conferences?
I think you have, yeah.
And I take it to conferences now, and I show this Action Man figure who is like the OCD man, and that's when it's weird, isn't it? When you cross the line, but that was kind of crossing the line.
I think where there's commercialisation for people to make profit off our suffering, that's where I think it becomes inappropriate, in my opinion. But again, we've all got different opinions on that. But I mean, again, just thinking back to the film, there's one scene where he's sitting in his sink, or the sink of his place of living, bleaching his feet, and it's sad to think that wasn't just for comedy effect. That unfortunately people with contamination fears do go down that route, and it's a horrible place to think.
I mean, I know. I mean, Ashley, has been is thank goodness you are CEO of OCD UK, because it needs a sufferer to be able to run an organisation like that. Because do you know what? I've had CBT, and I've done everything. I've done everything. I've done every medication. I've read all. But my problem, Ashley, with all the practitioners, is that sometimes I look at them in the eye and I go, "You don't know. You don't actually get it. You don't." And I don't say that in any condescending sense, but my partner is she tries her best, but she doesn't get it. You have to have an understanding of it. You have to have it inside you to actually equate to what the suffering is about and how you can cure it. And I struggle. I have a problem with all the therapy out there because it's so complex that I don't know whether any of those practitioners out there really, really understand it. If I wasn't an actor now and a writer, I would probably retrain as a therapist.
There are some good therapists out there, but unfortunately for us, getting to them through the NHS, it's hard, it's difficult. I mean, I'm trying to nip this final bit of my OCD in the bud, and I've just gone through 2 therapists who I basically sacked them after 2 sessions because they were just not good enough.
They don't have the qualifications because there's no money. Not their fault. There's no money. There's no investment. I did a Had you finished?
Yes, sorry.
I did a documentary in Wales a few years ago about the plight of the lack of funding in mental health, and obviously my area is OCD, so I fronted this program. Did you see it?
Yeah, the Wales one.
The Wales one, yeah.
Good one.
And it was just, thank you very much. It was so harrowing, and that's why I got a little bit tearful up there because we've been very light and we've laughed about it and everything else, but the moments during the film when he's been hugged and we all know those moments. I don't feel sorry for myself, but I've worked with some people now and met people on my documentary travels that are so blighted. I know children whose lives are hang in the balance, who have been destroyed. Not just the children, obviously the parents and everything else, but very recently, you don't know this, the young girl, the mother and the daughter who live in that cling film house. You've got to see this documentary. It's just extraordinary. Some of the people I met, this mother and daughter who have this house in South Wales, and before we even went in, she cling filmed all the cameras, all the camera equipment, all the sound equipment. We had to cling film. We went in, and it was like being in a theatre, an operating theatre. It was they bleached the pebble stones outside. It was the cleanest. I felt great. I mean, I've never felt so calm in my life. You could have literally ate off the floor, and it's remarkable. I've never seen a house like it, and I've met a lot of sufferers, but this was on a scale I've never seen. Anyway, it's very tragic. Tuesday, the daughter has just survived in the last 3 weeks her second suicide attempt. This girl of 25 who is beautiful and intelligent and engaged has just survived her second attempt at suicide. That's where we're at with OCD. It is not just about a little bit of OCD, which we scratch the skin. Everyone has it. It's not just even that. It's so much more. It's so much more. Another friend of mine, Lauren, we've done talks together. Her mother is very, very active in self-help groups. She set up a mum's net for mothers who have children with OCD. And I went to visit them. I did a conference. It was your conference in Liverpool. Did we do one in Liverpool?
We did. Yeah.
But there was a mother came up to me at the end of it and said, "Please help me. We think my daughter is going to kill herself." And I went along to Manchester. She was in the psychiatric unit in Manchester, in this wing. And the Manchester Children's Hospital is wonderful, but they've got a psychiatric wing. And I went there. She said, "Please come and talk to her because we're desperately worried about her future." And I went along, and I had to go through lots of signed papers and all that. And I met Lauren with her family in a room, and the problem was they didn't know where to put her, so they put her in this beautiful little house wing, whatever you call it, in the grounds of Manchester Children's Hospital. But it was for anorexics and bulimics and everything else, you know, which was terrible in itself. But she was sitting there as the only OCD patient, and she'd had enough. She was like 9 or 10, and when she walked into the room, I mean, it was just heartbreaking. And they were at their wits' end because they thought they were losing her. Yeah, and I just, so when I see times like that, I don't think about me, because, you know, I'm successful, I've done well, I've got through it, you know, I got away with it, and mine at my worst, as you know, Ashley, was nothing to what can be, you know, and it breaks my heart that children out there still, you know, my daughter has anxiety. The frontline treatment at the moment is pathetic. They do this hardly any. They pass hardly any exams. They're not. They kind of, and it's just like the real therapy you have to pay for.
Yeah, it's a problem. It is a postcode lottery. There is some good NHS services out there, so I'm going to fly the flag for the NHS, but it is a lottery to get to them. But just go back to the film. Thinking about the actor Michael's trail, it was fantastic. And I wondered, did you coach him, or did he go and talk to other people with those things? How did he?
Michael was a friend of mine. We'd worked as actors before, so we knew each other. And he did ring me up and say, let's meet. So I did meet Michael on a number of occasions. And yes, is the answer. Okay. I did talk to him, and he did, you know, sit me down and ask me questions. You know, excuse me. You know, when he does all the finger thing, that is lifted from me. That's directly from me. So he didn't know in the script. He couldn't work out. We tried to describe it as best we could, but we didn't actually do it. But I do, and it's funny because it's very accurate. It's as written. The list is, but there's another list which is watch. This is from when I was a kid. Watch, necklace, glasses, earring, because I used to have an earring. Money pocket, tissue pocket, comb pocket, something else pocket. Nothing on sock, shoes. Nothing on is bare feet. Nothing on sock, shoes. Nothing on underpants, trousers, belt. Nothing on t-shirts. And I used to reel that off every time. Every few hours I'd have to reel it off. So the sleep, rest, eating, wank, shit, man. Had a bath. Wash my hands, wash my face, clean my teeth. Treatment, which is like little spots. This is from when I was a kid. Hair color habits. hair color habits. And that's what I thought they were. They were habits. It's hair color. Color was, did I have enough color in my cheeks? Hair was hair, and habits. And for years, all my life, I was convinced they were just habits. And that's lifted and you know, portrayed on screen.
And he did a great job. And I mean, there'll always be Brian Clough for me to portray Brian Clough after the film. But am I right in thinking he got nominated for a BAFTA for Dirty Filthy Love?
Yeah, he got nominated for BAFTA and a whole clutch of nominations. I don't think, did he win any? I'm not sure. I know that Rhys Ifans won for Peter Cook that year, which is fine. But we were nominated for BAFTA. We won the RTS. We won broadcast. We won the Silver Award at the New York Film and TV Festival. We were nominated for a Prix Italia. It did really well. But more importantly, it was out there. It was out there, and to this day, I will get an email when it's way via an old agent or a recent agent from someone who's just found it in the bargain basement in Tesco or something, who've just watched it and said, "Oh my God." And that's what worries me, Ashley. Even now, 2018, you'd think with OCD UK, OCD Action, the fact we have those awful documentaries on Channel 4, OCD Cleaners, whatever else, which, you know, I've got no time for at all. But even now, there are people out there who don't know what they have or don't know what their grandchildren have. I was doing a talk at mental health in the workplace in Birmingham at the NEC a few years ago, and I was, I'd done my talk, and there was a group of people waiting to talk to me afterwards, and I was aware of this elderly gentleman being very quiet at the end, and he waited till everyone else had gone. He came over to me, and he hugged me, and I said, "Do you have any?" He said, "Yes, you've just talked about me." He said, "I'm 72 and I only happened to be walking past your talk, because in NEC there's lots of different talks going on. He said, I was on my way to get lunch, and I happened to hear you mention OCD, and I just walked in at the back, and he said, I'm 72, and you've just told me what I've got. And he filled up. 72 years of age, this is 3 years ago, and he didn't have a clue. And I said, God, I've got so much to tell you. And I gave him my email, my this. I told him about OCD UK. I'm always, as you know, farming people off to you. Every week, Ashley will get a phone call from someone. And he never, I would imagine he never got hold of you. He never emailed me or anything. But the fact that he stopped me in my tracks and said, you've just told me what I've got. Thank you.
Sometimes just knowing that's such a relief. And I get a lot at my support groups, or even on the telephone. People call and they'll want to find out if what they're going through is OCD. Really? Sometimes they'll break down, sometimes they'll say it's such a relief. And then you won't see them or hear from them again for a few weeks or months until they sort of get to grips with, well, okay, now I know what it is, what next? And then they come back again. And that can be quite a common sort of pathway.
Where do you think we are as a country now with OCD? I mean, is there enough out there, not help, but enough information out there now?
I think it's getting better. I think there's a lot of misinformation about OCD. Obsessive compulsive cleaners, which you quite rightly mentioned, the Channel 4 program's done a lot of damage. It's ironic because 3 or 4 years ago, Channel 4, in the space of 1 week, put out the best documentary about OCD I've ever seen. It was something called Bedlam. And then 2 days later, they put out the new series of Obsessive Compulsive Cleaners, the worst program about OCD I've ever made. So there's more information out there now, but a lot of people still misunderstand it, misinterpret what it is. For those of us that do have it, the problem we've got is getting access to the right treatment. It's meant to be available through the NHS, through what we call an IAP service, improving access to psychological therapies. But it's patchy, and we've got a lot of work to do.
How long have we got, Sophia? It's 20 past 10. Well, people want to start running away, go. I'll tell you what I'd like to do, if in the last few minutes we've got, whether there's any questions anyone has. Can we open it out? Yes, sir. That's a great question.
Sometimes there's no logic, is there? You can't even answer it. You just
It's a
feel
great.
it.
Yeah, but I want to answer it. I don't have an answer just yet, but I'm thinking it through. Okay, can I be absolutely honest with you? The fact is, OCD is not PC. It's so not politically correct. It has no rationale. And like Tourette's, it takes no prisoners. Okay? So hand on heart, my OCD was telling me that, I love this question. I've never been asked such an interesting question. Hand on heart, and I don't know what breeding, childhood information was at that moment that tramp's poo is probably poor poo and more infectious than a theatre goer's poo. That's the only rationale I can give it. That the fact it wasn't ordinary poo, because ordinary poo or posh poo would have been all right, because it had been good food, healthy cattle, organic. That's all right. I'll have a bit of that. But it was tramp's poo, hand-me-down burgers, leftover food on the thing. That, hand on heart, is my un-PC response to that poo. I thought my OCD was saying, not only have you got poo on your clothes, it's fucking tramp's poo. Thank you. What?
Quality.
What did you say?
I think you say quality. I think.
Thank you very much.
Lady here.
7. Did anyone hear that? She's just saying what a wonderful actor she thinks I am. The writing was superb, and it should have been me.
It's funny, I didn't hear it like that.
No. Repeat what she said.
Basically, if I understood correctly, you was asking, Ian got OC around the age of 7, And is it PTSD? Is it a parenting issue? Is that
Is,
right?
is there a trigger? Was there a trigger?
Yeah.
I'm not the expert, so I don't know. I actually don't know. I think certain people are susceptible to it. I think certain people have it in their genes, their DNA, to have to acquire or to be a victim to OCD. So I think a lot of us have it, but people who are more susceptible to it, if there is a trigger, we will react. Help me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the honest answer is we don't know exactly what causes OCD for each person. There's lots of theories out there, and I could put 10 experts in the room and they'll argue till they're blue in the face about what causes OCD. Some will say it's genetic, some will say it's learned behaviour, some will say it's chemical imbalance. But the honest answer is we just don't know. And it's just sometimes it can just be purely bad luck that the wrong thought pops into the head at the wrong time of your life, and bang, you've suddenly got OCD.
But there's no coincidence that when I the girlfriend trouble, the wife trouble was it for me. It was a girlfriend. You know this when he's having sex and she keeps saying concentrate. That was my last night spent with the love of my life. I was having sex with her, and I couldn't stop looking at my fingernail, obsessing about when I last cut it. Okay, and she was saying, "Concentrate, for God's sake!" And this was the shag that would have been make or break. Okay, it was the make or break shag for our relationship. Right, no fucking pressure. And I loved her, and she wasn't sure. The jury was out, so she thought, "I'll give him one last chance, get him in the sack." What's he doing? Checking his fucking fingernail. And that was it for her. She literally, I kid you not, we didn't put it in the film, she pushed me off, and I sat on the edge of the bed in my flat in Camden, and she pulled up the covers, and she said, "You're scaring me, you're weird, I can't cope with this anymore." And what was I doing? Right? I was on the edge of the bed, checking my fingernail. That's all I cared about. That fingernail was more important than anything she was saying. I once, the last time I went on a stage in theatre was, I was doing a show in Cardiff, and I was in my dressing room, and I could hear on the tannoy my cue line that I was meant to go on stage, and I couldn't get off the chair that I was standing on because I was standing on the chair under the light bulb, examining that same fucking nail, examining it, and the stage manager came in and said, "You're meant to be on stage," and I couldn't physically. This is an audience waiting for my entrance, and I was literally like that, and so my whole career was put on hold, like the guy with the ice cream in the film. Nothing mattered. I mean, I almost got sacked from the job. The actors didn't speak to me for the rest of the run, but that didn't matter. At that moment in time, whether I was having sex with someone or had a 200 auditorium waiting for my entrance, that nail was more prominent in my life. So, what was your question? Okay, backtrack. So that was a trigger. She kicking me off the bed, and that was the end of our relationship, and I spiraled. And that was when my OCD really was. So that was a trigger. So I don't know. I don't know which comes first.
Yeah, there's a lot of train of thought on it, and we just don't know. But the good news is we generally know how to treat it if we can get a right quality treatment.
Next question. Yeah. Oh. No, I know what's normal. I know, but I get you, and I've heard him and read him say that. Read him say that. I've heard him say that. I've read that. Fuck, Ashley. Do you know what? I'll tell you what I do. What I do question myself. I say to myself, would you be willing to be a lesser actor or a lesser writer, not as good an actor and not as good a writer, but have no OCD? And yes is the answer. I'd rather be not as good as actor. If there is a connection, and if it does make me the better actor, I would rather. So I'm answering your question. Yeah, I'd rather not be as good an actor and not be as good a writer to have a life without OCD, because it's shit. It's just awful. I can't even enjoy my children. You know, when they come into the house after a day at school and all that, and they'll come up with some homework or something they've made or some happy news. My OCD, like a dog with a bone, come on, there's a bit of excitement coming in, a bit of happiness in your life. Where's that bone? Where's that OCD? And it will always undermine me. I always call my happiness my second-hand laugh. Because I can never enjoy, and this is the reason why I'd rather be a poorer actor or writer and be rid of it. Because it's I have to, my life, my happiness is second-hand. The first reaction of euphoria, you know, when you see something nice, or you taste food, or take a drink of wine, or a crisp, or you hug your children, or see a blue sky, might jump in and ruin it for that moment. So I've never had that euphoric enjoyment. It's second-hand. Once I've dealt with the OCD, then I have a second-hand. Not to have had that in my life, yeah, any day. Ashley? Seriously?
Yeah, I want a shot of my OCD. I mean, the only good thing that's come from me having OCD is meeting some wonderful people, that my colleagues Sue and James, yourself. But no offence, I'd rather not know you guys and not have OCD.
But it is the $64,000 question, and I do generally. I hate it. It has, I would say, it's put a dampener on my life, and not so much as when I had my children. When it started preventing me from really enjoying that euphoric moment with my children, that's when I thought, fuck you, I hate you. Do you have it?
Good question, though. I do like the question. Got us
Thank
thinking.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both Ian and myself, we've had OCD from when we were children. Mine became a real, what I call showstopper, when I became 16, 17. So one of the things we said when we started this charity was that it's important other young people don't lose their lives, or lose their 20s, their enjoyable lives, their teenage years. So we have got some publications. We've got a booklet for children, which we've not got tonight, but I can always send you, which is sort of a cartoon type booklet for very young children that sort of explains what OCD is. My colleague Sue is up there somewhere. We're working on a project specifically for teenagers with OCD, and part of that project will be designing or helping the teenagers design a brand new booklet for themselves that they wanted, that would then go on to help other teenagers with OCD. So we did have some of those, but we've actually run out of stock, which is why we're doing this project again. So we've got. So yeah.
Brilliant.
And this element of feeling alone, feeling crazy.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Very quickly, yeah. If people are waiting, it's that waiting list, isn't it? It's like 3 months for your first assessment, you know. And it's not the NHS's fault. I know. Actually, thank God they're there. Self-help groups all over the country, and they are lifesavers. They really are. I'm just echoing what you're saying. And I'm repeating myself. When I walked into that room, I was expecting to find a room full of strangers. I knew these people more than my mum and dad and my sister. And when I walked into that room, I felt I'm not alone. I can, you know, it was astonishing, and I can't explain it. It was so cathartic, and I walked in and I wanted to hug each and every one of them. And then I sat down and I thought it was going to be all, you know, sad and tragic. And then when they started laughing, we'd go around. I'm going to digress 1 second. We started going around about our week, around the group with our, you know, what each person had done that week. And we pissed ourselves. It was hysterical. And I remember the guy that chaired the meeting, he said, right, we're now going to have the meeting altogether was only 2 hours long. He said, right, we're going to stop now. We're going to have a 45-minute coffee break, and then we're going to come back for the last half hour. And I remember thinking, that sounds a long time for a coffee break. And then I realized why they needed 45 minutes, because that's how long it took to make a cup of coffee. And it's touched on in the film. But, I mean, everyone had their rituals to get a cup of coffee or a tea in 45 minutes. We were exhausted. We got back to and I got back to my seat in a round table in this Florence Nightingale centre, and I sat there and I go, oh God, that was. And I turned to the guy next to us and we were both out of breath because we took so long to make a fucking cup of coffee. And I went, oh, God, thank God for that. And I looked over and there was a lady sitting next to me. She said, you should be so lucky. And she picked up a coffee and she started doing that. Her ritual had only just started. And Shirley, unfortunately, didn't really do it as well as we had written. But she was the woman. Do you remember when they buy the urn? And she just does that with the coffee. Well, she cheated a bit. But what it was, this woman had to measure the distance between because otherwise she'd smash it. And I always remember saying, you should be so lucky. And she took about 20 minutes to take her first sip. So self-help groups, even if you haven't got OCD, go. Because they're hysterical. It's the funniest 2 hours and 45 minutes you'll ever have.
I think I must be doing mine wrong then.
Any last a couple of questions? Yes, sir.
Two-part question.
Yeah.
Interesting title. How did you come by that title?
Yeah. Second part.
And the second part is, if you were to write it now, the first part, would you still stay with that title?
Second part first. Oh, I feel like a politician. I've always wanted to say that. I wouldn't have the title again. I'd call it probably Chewing Gum Thoughts. I wouldn't include the title. I actually was watching it and thinking, do you know what? It's 14 years now. I quite fancy having another go at it and writing it again, updating it and putting it out there, because it didn't have. It was going to be a movie at first, and it never quite made the movie status. I would like to rewrite it and do it as a movie now, and get it really right, and get rid of the silly mistakes like the Cookie's Nest element. So I look back at it now and I think it could be done better. Dirty Filthy Love, it was a cheat. I'm sorry, it's quite blatant. I knew that having that title, and I have to say, and you may agree with this, quite a few people wrote to me and emailed me and said, I would have watched it if I'd have known, but I was put off by the name. So I think the jury's a little bit out on that. Dirty Filthy Love, as in dirty contamination, filthy as in contamination, but love as in throughout all the contamination you can find love. It's a little bit kind of...
Yeah, I mean, from an OC point of view, contamination and dirty, cleaning kind of things, it's only a small percentage of people with OC. But one thing that is common with everybody with OCD is I call it intrusive thoughts. You call it chewing gum thoughts. So everybody with the OC gets intrusive thoughts, and they can be about any subject. So I suppose there's that connotation with that.
Yeah. What do you think then?
I suppose if you were looking through Netflix and saw that, you think we were
Yes. And that's why we got so many millions of people watching it.
It just was the combination of the three words.
Dirty Filthy Love.
It didn't really portray the story that you wanted to tell.
Fair enough. I probably, for that reason, I would change it. Let that be the last question. Did anyone see it first time round?
Yeah, I did.
How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 6 of you. I think they should put it on again, Anyway, last question.
I've got one for you before we finish as well. I'll take one more. Then.
Yes, gentlemen.
I'd just like to say that the film, and I'm thinking of the film, I thought the film was superb because it left you with that tremendous sense that the people involved in making it, including yourself, the writing of it, and particularly the actors and the directors, they produced something that made sense to people looking in without having that same issue. There was a sense of humanity and reality in the film,
Brilliant.
which I would love to see in all films.
Yes, bless you.
What used to be called issue-based, but that's become
Yes.
a bit...
Yes.
Not a nice thing to say, but I thought it was fantastic because of that, because it gave you a very strong feeling of where all the characters in it were.
Brilliant.
It was brilliantly done.
Oh,
and I would
great.
encourage you to update it and do a movie version, because I think there's a great need for films that display that kind of humanity in reality. I've seen 1 or 2 here recently, which impressed me completely with those 2 words. It was humanity and reality.
Right.
One was about faith and church, and the whole audience, most of the audience, misunderstood the whole film for me.
Right.
But, you know, to me, it was a triumph. That film was a triumph of humanity and reality over faith. And
Right.
how often do you get people to admit that? You don't.
Yes.
But it was a marvellous attempt at it. And the same thing applied to this. I thought the humanity and the reality was stunning.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. You got any money? Because I'll rewrite it tomorrow. We just need the money.
So on that script, rewrite it tomorrow. What are you doing at the moment? Tin Star? Tin Star?
Tin Star is just been. I did a thing for Sky Atlantic called Tin Star with Tim Roth. It's just been sold to Channel 4, so it'll be on your screen soon. Channel 4.
Second series?
No, first season is
right.
going on Channel 4 soon, and I've just been in Canada filming the second season, because we call it seasons in America, don't we, Maureen? It's seasons and series. So I've just filmed the second season of thing, and I'm about to start doing a thing for Jeff Pope, who now his career has gone stratospheric. I'm clinging onto his coattails for dear life. He's now an Oscar nominee. The guy that co-wrote this, he wrote Philomena with Judi Dench. So, you know about him, don't you? Thanks. So he's now stratospheric, and every now and again he'll bung me a little part. So I'm doing his new drama called A Confession about a murder. And then I just landed a part yesterday playing. Anyone seen Gotham? Yeah? Well, it's the follow-up to Gotham, and it's called Pennyworth, and it's Batman's butler, Pennyworth. I know my son knew all about it, but I'm playing Batman's butler's dad. There you go. Thank you. Batman's butler's dad. Yes, star at last. So my son keeps saying, "What, Batman? No. Batman's butler. No. Batman's butler's dad." Yeah, so I'm doing that next, and I've written another film with Jeff, and it's just been picked up by a producer. So, and it's all about a matchmaking festival in Ireland, which exists, called Love Island. There you go. So that's what I'm doing next. What are you doing next? You just opened new headquarters.
Yes,
This guy is so on the button when it comes to OCD.
Well, I would like to be. We're a small charity, but we've just relocated to Derbyshire, where Sue and myself are based, and we're doing our annual conference, which we take around the country each year. So it costs us a small fortune. We lose money every year, but we think it's important that we, as a charity, go to where people are struggling. And because part of the illness is you can't travel even outside your own town centre. So we can't expect people to come to London, Birmingham, Manchester every year. So last year we took it up to Glasgow. Prior to that, we've been to Stirling. This year we're going to the South Coast. We're going to Brighton in 3 weeks' time.
With me?
Oh, yes, you're coming.
Yeah,
yes,
I'm coming.
I forgot about
Yeah.
that. Is he still coming?
Yeah, I am.
You heard it. He said he's coming.
Yeah. Any last questions before we wrap up? Is it a nice question?
Well, I just wanted to ask, out of the plethora of symptoms of OCD, why is it always contamination that we focus on?
It's still a valid type of OCD, so we shouldn't dismiss it. But yes, equally, documentaries should certainly make that point and make the point there's different types of OCD. I think when somebody's writing their own story, I think they're entitled to write. I think it is okay for them to write their story. But yeah, there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of different types of OCD. What we saw on screen is just a small part of that. What I suffer with is just a small part. What Ian suffers with is just a small part. But together, the thing that brings us all together is those unwanted, aggressive, intrusive thoughts.
I think you're about to say what brings us together is tramp shit.
Okay.